And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Thursday, June 12th, 2025. And to set things up, we have an area of low pressure on this Thursday later morning that's sitting here in the southeast quadrant of the Gulf. There's an easterly wave working east to west, also entering the northern panhandle from British Columbia. So this is going to combine to produce some areas of rain or rain showers, especially over the northern portions of the panhandle as we go through this Thursday afternoon, night into early Friday. Plus, wind field around this area of low pressure may briefly strengthen on Friday just offshore of, say, Prince of Wales Island and Haida Gwaii down through this region. Otherwise, to the west, we still have general low pressure in the Bering Sea. Somewhat strong southerly moist flow of air coming northward out through the eastern Bering from across the eastern Aleutians, eastern Bering along the west coast. This is leading to areas of low stratus and fog that extend all the way up through the Chukchi Sea. And that'll continue here into the early weekend. Meanwhile, ridge of high pressure over the mainland, and that is creating sunshine and warmest temperatures we've seen so far early this summer season. In fact, some temperatures are going to be getting up into the 80s across the central, east central interior. So think about high density altitude and needing a little more runway to take off, especially if you have a heavier load. So keep that in mind. Doesn't look like yet we could see a 90-degree reading, but certainly 80s will be showing up here in the warm spots of the interior. Now, as we get into Friday afternoon, could be a few thunderstorms pop up in and around the Alaska Range, Talkeetna Mountains, Wrangell, St. Elias, on up toward 40 Mile, Gold Country, lower Yukon Flats. Conditions should be improving Friday afternoon, generally VFR over the Panhandle. Meanwhile, we still find IFR conditions out over the Beaufort Sea, Chukchi Sea down into the Bering and eastern Aleutians. Another note, with that warm air crossing the Brooks Range North Slope, we have the North Slope rivers really melting off fast. The breakup is going to be occurring this weekend and early next week. A flood watch is in effect for all of the North Slope rivers due to this rapid melting of the snowpack from the warm temperatures that could lead to some flooding. And then Saturday morning, we find IFR conditions over western northern Gulf, especially Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai down into Kodiak Island, covering much of the Bering Sea, pockets of IFR, southern panhandle, Haida Gwaii, Dixon Entrance. Also up here along the Beaufort Sea coast, just off the coast and out over the Chukchi Sea. And then again, Saturday afternoon, there could be a few thunderstorms that flare up with the daytime heating up through the middle upper Tanana Valley, 40 Mile Gold Country, again, Talkeetna Mountains, Wrangell, St. Elias. Generally, VFR conditions expected Saturday afternoon for the Panhandle, much of the interior. IFR out over the Beaufort, Chukchi Seas off the coast. And then we find perhaps some IFR there off of Sandpoint, Chiknik there, and the Alaska Peninsula. But up there at Anatuvik Pass, VFR conditions there along the east central Brooks Range. Same thing, Adigan Pass. VFR conditions with warmer temperatures across that region. Lake Clark Merrill, VFR expected in the west arm of the Alaska Range, coming up through rainy and windy passes, though southeast of Windy Pass, as you're flying toward the Talkeetna Mountains, you could see cumulus buildups and perhaps a few showers or thunderstorms that develop in the afternoon and early evening. Same thing, Isabel Pass. Could be a stray shower or thunderstorm there, though generally VFR conditions across the central eastern Alaska Range. Mentasta also perhaps an isolated shower thunderstorm. And Tanita Pass down as you get down in the Copper River Basin, there could be a widely scattered shower thunderstorm there. Portage Pass should generally see VFR conditions throughout the day Friday. And then in the far northern panhandle, starting out MVFR Friday morning, giving way to VFR conditions, especially during the afternoon. So freezing levels at the surface. Up there around Point Thompson, you can see low temperatures just below freezing or near that mark, though temperatures are going to be warming across the North Slope this weekend. And then as we look at the freezing levels aloft, they are lower here over the Panhandle because of this area of low pressure. So we have colder air aloft with that low. So lower freezing levels aloft, and then also down here in through the central northern Bering. Freezing levels are below 4,000 feet where this low center is, and then with the southerly flow bringing in freezing levels above 8,000 feet across the southeastern Bering, the eastern Aleutians upwards of 10,000 feet and south of the Alaska Peninsula. But notice too that we have freezing levels that are generally at or above 8,000 feet over much of southern mainland up into the east central interior and northwest Canada there over the Yukon. So where there is precipitation, where there is thicker cloud cover producing that precipitation, we do find a band within that southerly flow of moist air coming northward. Freezing levels above 8,000 feet along the west coast, especially Seward Peninsula, Yukon coastline, and then eastern Bering down to the eastern Aleutians, especially the Pribilovs down toward the eastern Aleutians. You could find icing above 10,000 feet in those precipitation producing clouds. And then with the low that's out in the Gulf, perhaps above 8,000 feet, there will be a cluster, an area of showers and some rain out over the lower Gulf, North Pacific interface Friday. And you can see that circulation at 30,000 feet, roughly 300 millibars. Here's that one low circulation. The other one back here in through the Bering, and we have a southerly flow of air along the west side of the state and across the eastern northern Bering at 9,000 feet or 700 millibars. Get that donut circulation, the wind field around it, 30, 40 knots there along areas of the Panhandle and eastern Gulf. But very broad, pretty notable wind field here from the western mainland, the Chukchi Sea coastline, all the way down, especially here, Nunavik Island, down into the lower Alaska Peninsula. The wind field aloft at 9,000 feet, we're looking at 50 to locally 70 knots there as you get from around south of Nunavik Island to near St. Paul. And then, of course, at the surface, or just above the surface, 3,000 feet, we have the low circulation here, winds 30, 35 knots, pushing just off of Haida Gwaii and just west of Prince of Wales Island. But up here, as we look over at the southeast Bering, there is a core of winds 50 to as high as 65, 70 knots from the south. And that's where there'll be some notable turbulence, lower Alaska Peninsula up toward Nunavik Island, of course. Greatest threat for some isolated severe turbulence in that southerly flow will be here, Nunavik Island, Cape Newingham, down here along the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula. Elsewhere surrounding that, we have in orange the likelihood of widespread moderate turbulence all along the west coast, Lisburn Peninsula, far western portion of the Brooks Range, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence, St. Matthew, YK coastlines, and then again, down here trailing out in the eastern Aleutians, we expect turbulence surface to 4,000 feet with the potential for some low-level wind shear as well.